Friends, if you want to watch super hit movie Southpaw in English, then you must like this video if you're visiting our channel for the first time. Don't forget subscribe to our channel, friends. In today's video, the movie we're going to talk about is called Southpaw. We will talk about what this movie is and where you can watch it, all the interesting facts about this movie in today's video. I'm going to tell you. I'm also going to give you all the information on which platform or on which satellite channel you will get to watch this movie. Also, we will talk in detail about the technical department, music department, pre-production, filming, post-production, budget, box office collection of this film. We will also talk about the story of this film, and I will also give you a small review of the story of this film. Apart from this, we will discuss about the facts of this film's storyline, starcast actors' performance in the film, and which character has played which role. That's why I request you, friends, to watch this video till the end, so let's start the video. Southpaw is a 2015 American sports drama film directed by Antoine Fuqua, written by Kurt Sutter, and starring Jake Gyllenhaal, Forrest Whitaker, and Rachel McAdams. The film follows a boxer who sets out to get his life back on track after losing his wife to gun violence and later his young daughter to Child Protective Services. The film was released on July 24, 2015 by the Weinstein Company. The film received mixed reviews from critics, while Gyllenhaal and Una Lawrence's performances received positive reviews. The film grossed $94.2 million worldwide against a production budget of $30 million. The film is set in New York City, but it was filmed in Pittsburgh and the nearby town of Indiana, Pennsylvania. The film marked one of the last films to be scored by James Horner, and the first of 3 posthumous releases to feature his music, the other 2 being the 33 and the Magnificent 7. The film and the film's soundtrack album are dedicated to his memory. Plot: Billy the Great, Hope, is a professional boxer and the reigning champion in the light heavyweight division with an orthodox stance and a win-loss record of 42-0, living in New York City with his wife Maureen and their only daughter, Leela. During his match against Darius Jones at Madison Square Garden, Maureen is scared as Billy takes several horrific hits to the face, resulting in profuse bleeding out of his eye. Billy wins the match by knockout and retains the light heavyweight title despite nasty injuries. As the press surrounds Billy, a younger upstart boxer, Miguel Magic Escobar, taunts Billy to fight him. Upon returning home, Maureen fears for Billy's safety and urges him to quit. Later at the Hope House, Maureen talks to Billy's manager, Jordan Maines, and disagrees with his plan to get Billy to sign a 2-year deal for 3 more fights. Billy and Maureen go to a fundraiser ball where Billy gives a speech acknowledging Maureen, Leela, Jordan, and his friends. Miguel is in attendance as well, and as Billy is leaving, Miguel goads him by insulting Maureen and saying he will take his titles away from him, leading to a brawl. A gunshot from Miguel's brother Hector rings out, and Billy sees that Maureen has been shot. Hector flees while Maureen dies in Billy's arms. Shortly thereafter, Billy begins abusing alcohol and drugs. Billy meets with Jordan, who suggests selling the house to solve his financial problems. Jordan then books Billy a fight against Khalil Touré, in which Billy gets beaten up so badly that his corner throws in the towel. Blinded by damage due to headshots, Billy accidentally headbutts the referee in the face. Billy is suspended for a year, has no income, and owes the ref and the network damages. His house and belongings are repossessed. Both Jordan and longtime trainer Eli Frost abandoned him to work with Miguel. Only John is there for him and supports him. Billy runs his car into the tree outside his home one night. Layla finds Billy bleeding on the floor and calls 911. Billy wakes up in the hospital to learn that Layla is being put in the care of Child Protective Services officer Angela Rivera. With nowhere left to go, Billy visits the Wills gym, where he meets former boxer Tick Wills, who is blind in one eye after his last fight left him injured. Billy wants Tick to get him back on his feet, but Tick knows about his drug problems and declines to train him. He offers Billy a janitorial job. Billy meets with Angela to see Layla. However, Layla blames him for their problems and refuses to see him. Billy returns to the gym and accepts the janitorial job. While working there, he befriends a boy named Hoppy, who is also an aspiring boxer. He learns that Hoppy's father abuses his mother, which he reports to Tick. As he starts to make amends in his life, Billy continues visiting Layla, and his persistence wins her over. After winning a charity match, Billy is visited by Jordan. He now manages Miguel, who recently won the championship from Khalil Touré. Jordan wants to book a fight between the two within 6 weeks, knowing that Billy will not have enough time to train. Billy thinks he can make a comeback and wants Tick to train him, but Tick refuses, believing Billy just wants revenge. Billy later learns from Tick that Hoppy has died after trying to defend his mother from his father, who shot him. Lamenting that he could not save Hoppy, Tick decides to help Billy train for the upcoming fight. Noting his efforts to turn his life around, the judge grants Billy custody of Layla, and she moves back in with him. Visiting Maureen's grave together, Billy tells Layla he is going to fight again and grants her wish of letting her remain present. On the night of the fight, Angela brings Layla into the dressing room where they watch it on TV. Miguel takes the early upper hand. Both fighters trade furious punches, round after round. Miguel then insults Maureen, causing Billy to lose concentration. In a fit of rage, Billy lashes out and almost stops the fight. Tick cautions Billy not to let Miguel control him. Billy controls his anger and in the final round gains the upper hand against Miguel. In the final seconds, Billy blocks a jab from Miguel and lands a shot to the face before turning southpaw and with a furious uppercut sends Miguel to the canvas. Miguel gets up at the last second and both corners are filled with two team staffs. Despite a split decision, final score 344 to 341, with Billy having 3 points over Miguel, giving the first rounds to Miguel, Billy is announced as the new champion. Billy then collapses in the corner, thanking Maureen and committing himself to Layla. Tick and the team lift him up on their shoulders as he closes his eyes tearfully and smiles. After the fight, Layla meets Billy in the dressing room, where they hug for the first time since Maureen's death. Billy says Maureen would be proud of her, and she tells him she loves him. Cast: Jake Gyllenhaal as Billy the Great Hope, Forrest Whitaker as Titus Tick Wills, Rachel McAdams as Maureen Hope, Una Lawrence as Layla Hope, Naomi Harris as Angela Rivera, Curtis 50 Cent Jackson as Jordan Maines, Miguel Gomez as Miguel Magic Escobar, Danny Henriquez as Hector Escobar, Rita Ora as Maria Escobar, Skyland Brooks as Hoppy, Victor Ortiz as Ramon, Bo Knapp as John, Malcolm Mays as Gabe, Claire Foley as Alice, Jim Lampley as himself, Roy Jones Jr. as himself. Production: Eminem was originally supposed to play the role of Billy Hope. The film's screenwriter Kurt Sutter said the project was inspired by the rapper's personal struggles. He stated that he had meetings with Eminem's producing partners over the past 7 years looking for something to do together. I know he's very selective and doesn't do a lot, but he shared so much of his personal struggle in this raw and very honest album, one that I connected with on a lot of levels. He is very interested in the boxing genre, and it seemed like an apt metaphor because his own life has been a brawl. In a way, this is a continuation of the 8 Mile 2002 story, but we are doing a metaphorical narrative of the second chapter of his life. He'll play a world champion boxer who really hits a hard bottom and has to fight to win back his life for his young daughter. At its core, this is a retelling of his struggles over the last 5 years of his life, using the boxing analogy. I love that the title refers to Marshall being a lefty, which is to boxing what a white rapper is to hip-hop. Dangerous, unwanted, and completely unorthodox. It's a much harder road for a southpaw than a right-handed boxer. Producers Alan and Peter Rich have given a slightly different story about Eminem's involvement, however stating that they set out to make a boxing movie similar to The Champ, but wanted to make the story about a father-daughter relationship as opposed to The Champ's father-son story. Recalling Eminem's strong relationship with his daughter, they asked him, and he was immediately receptive. On December 13, 2010, DreamWorks acquired the script, with Eminem eyed to play the lead role 13. However, the following August, the studio dropped the project. Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer picked up the film that October. In December 2012, Eminem dropped out of the film to focus instead on his music. Antoine Fuqua signed on to the project in March 2014, with Jake Gyllenhaal replacing Eminem. Other casting news was announced in May 2014 with Forest Whitaker, Lupita Nyong'o, and Rachel McAdams officially joining the cast. In August of that year, it was announced that Naomi Harris would be replacing Nyong'o. Tyrese Gibson was cast, but his scenes were cut from the film. Gyllenhaal did the research for his role by doing tons of reading on boxers, orphan boxers, the spirit of gyms all over America, children who start early, the history of foster care in America, while also spending 5 months training as a boxer. Eminem would later praise Gyllenhaal's performance, noting that Jake smashed it in an interview with Zane Lowe. Southpaw marks the first investment in an American film by Wanda Pictures, a division of Wang Jianlin's Chinese conglomerate Dalian Wanda Group, too. Principal photography began on June 16, 2014. It was originally to be set in Detroit, yet Pittsburgh was chosen for the filming and was used as a double for New York. Release: the film had its world premiere at the 2015 Shanghai International Film Festival on June 15, 2015, where it competed, and was released on July 24, 2015, by the Weinstein Company. Reception: box office. Southpaw grossed $52.4 million in North America and $38.5 million in other territories, for a total gross of $94.2 million against a budget of $30 million. In its opening weekend, the film grossed $16.7 million from 2,772 theaters, finishing fifth at the box office. Critical response: the review aggregator website Rotten Tomatoes gives the film a rating of 60%, based on 242 reviews, with an average rating of 6/10. The site's critical consensus reads, Jake Gyllenhaal delivers an impressively committed performance, but Southpaw beats it down with a dispiriting drama that pummels viewers with genre cliches. On Metacritic, the film has a score of 57 out of 100, based on 42 critics, indicating mixed or average reviews. On CinemaScore, audiences gave the film an average grade of A on an A+ to F scale. Soren Anderson of the Seattle Times gave the film 2.5 stars out of 4, saying Southpaw, a boxing movie with a theme of redemption, is redeemed by the performances of its two main actors, Jake Gyllenhaal and Forest Whitaker. Ty Burr of the Boston Globe gave the film 2.5 stars out of 4, saying, this is a genre with especially sturdy bones, and when Southpaw connects, which is more often than you might expect, you feel it down to your toes. Ann Hornaday of the Washington Post gave the film 1.5 stars out of 4, saying Southpaw may be rote, predictable, and mawkish, but none of those faults lie in its star. Even when he looks like an unholy mess, he transcends the movie he's in. Stephen Rhee of the Philadelphia Inquirer gave the film 3 out of 4 stars, saying, what keeps this cornball business from getting out of hand is the commitment of Gyllenhaal, whose performance is fierce and muscular in and out of the ring. Michael Phillips of the Chicago Tribune gave the film 2.5 stars out of 4, saying, the script may have hamburger for brains, but Fuqua slams it home with the help of actors who give their all, even when giving a little less might have made things more interesting. Peter Howell of the Toronto Star gave the film 2.5 stars out of 4, saying, this isn't great cinema, but it's satisfying movie making, with nothing more on its mind than telling a heart-tugging story. A.O. Scott of the New York Times said, I wish I could say Southpaw was a knockout, or even a contender, that it went the distance or scored on points. But it's strictly an undercard bout, displaying enough heart and skill to keep the paying customers from getting too restless. Benjamin Nugent of the New York Times has compared the film to Robert De Niro, stating, pity Jake Gyllenhaal, who despite getting shredded for Southpaw, could not outbox the shadow of Robert De Niro's Raging Bull performance. Chris Nashawati of Entertainment Weekly gave the film a C+, saying, just as director Antoine Fuqua starts to close in on something interesting and unexpected, he retreats to the safety of his corner and gives us what we've seen too many times before, a predictable flurry of melodramatic jabs. Barbara Vandenberg of the Arizona Republic gave the film 3 out of 5 stars, saying, Southpaw is all about the fist. There's no delicate footwork here, no lingering grace notes. It's a film played entirely in power chords. James Berardinelli of Real Views gave the film 3 out of 4 stars, saying, Southpaw isn't content with presenting a gallery of cliched characters. It takes the time to put flesh on the bones. Colin Covert of the Star Tribune gave the film 1 out of 4 stars, slamming Gyllenhaal's performance, saying as a troubled slugger, Gyllenhaal is impressively muscle-bound, but gives no knockout performance. His work drags on like 12 rounds of fistfight fatigue. Boxing isn't a sport of surprises. It's not about who can throw the most original punch or dodge in a brand new fashion. Like so many sports, it's about mastering techniques and repeating those moves more fluidly than the competition. And so the familiarity of Antoine Fuqua's Southpaw feels almost appropriate for the subject matter. There are so few narrative surprises in this traditional tale of a boxer felled by personal tragedy who rises again to save the one person in his life who matters to him that one can pretty much map out the entire venture from the preview. And yet, not every film needs to reinvent the wheel. Working from almost exactly the same template he did on Sons of Anarchy, a show that verged on Greek tragedy and also presented men who exist in worlds of violence and are often undone or saved by their children, writer Kurt Sutter plays with the very familiarity that will drive some critics away, but comfort viewers looking for an old-fashioned tale of redemption. As I wrote about Sons of Anarchy 2 years ago, watching characters with whom we can identify persevere through the proverbial fire allows us to believe we can surmount comparatively minor obstacles in our own lives. The exact same thing applies to Southpaw. The increasingly remarkable Jake Gyllenhaal transforms himself yet again as Billy Hope, a boxing champion near the end of his career. Southpaw opens with an atypically difficult fight for the champ, one that goes into the late rounds and leaves him battered and bloodied. His wife, Maureen, Rachel McAdams, encourages him to take a break. As she warns him, 2 more years of this and he'll be punch-drunk and unable to spend time with the most important person in his life, his daughter Layla, a breakthrough child performance from Una Lawrence, genuinely in the moment in every scene. Billy doesn't know much outside of boxing. He grew up in child services, which is where he not only met Maureen, but the posse of friends who hang around after fights and encourage his rise to fame. As often happens in the world of boxing, a newcomer wants a shot at the king. Miguel Escobar, Miguel Gomez, is a younger, more agile fighter who shouts at Hope after press conferences that he wants his time in the ring. Promoter-manager Jordan Maines, Curtis 50 Cent Jackson, doesn't want to schedule the Escobar versus Hope fight yet, trying to get a few more wins and their accompanying cash payouts in the books. Hope wants the big match, but everything changes when a physical altercation between the often violent pugilist and the rising star ends in gunfire. When the smoke clears, Maureen has a bullet-sized hole in her stomach, and Billy's life has been forever changed. He's been barred from the only thing he knows, spirals into suicidal behavior, and risks losing his daughter forever. Can he rise again? On Sons of Anarchy, and even The Shield, for which he was a formative writer, Kurt Sutter examined the intersection of aggression and emotion. Men like Jax Teller and Vic Mackey were willing to cross lines of violence to save those they loved and their ways of life. In many ways, Billy Hope falls into this lineage. He is a man who has had a tough upbringing and knows little more than how to fight and love. 2 elements of human existence that many people would think are on different ends of a spectrum, but that Sutter has always presented as living in unison in some men, especially those who have had to fight their entire lives. When everything that matters to Billy Hope is taken away from him in one instant, he doesn't so much shift gears as rebuild the essence of who he's always been, going to a new trainer named Tick, Forrest Whitaker, and trying to find his center. Sutter recognizes that men like Hope, or Teller for that matter, are at their best when they are committed and devoted to what drives them. Gyllenhaal gets that too. In the ring, he plays Hope as a force of nature, screaming into the camera, blood intermingling with spit that hits the lens. Outside of the ring, Gyllenhaal recognizes that men like Hope are often insecure, even shy when they're talking about personal emotional things. Look at how Gyllenhaal carries himself differently with the boys in his entourage, Jordan, his wife, and eventually his new trainer. In scenes of potential redemption, such as when he's talking to Tick or Layla's caseworker, Naomi Harris, He lowers his gaze, almost like a child hoping to get the answer that he so desperately needs. Again, Gyllenhaal's physicality says more about the character than anything in the film. Just as he did in Prisoners and Nightcrawler, Gyllenhaal makes daring, confident decisions. He has quietly turned into one of our most physically confident actors. And it's nice to see his strong work here matched by an excellent turn from Whitaker as well. Sadly, too much of the rest of the ensemble, other than Lawrence, feels like a plot device, especially Harris's caseworker. Director Antoine Fuqua is no stranger to stories of the dangers of macho male aggression, and he proves to be a good fit with Sutter. His style is aggressive, often placing us in the middle of a fight, literally getting punched by an opponent. It can be a bit too frenetic, and I do think there's a stronger version of Southpaw that catches its breath a bit more often to find the character beats outside of the ring. There's a brief moment when Billy tells Tick, "My wife would have liked you." That's the kind of human interaction that the film could have used more of in the end. I also think Sutter cuts a few corners in the second half, particularly with a troubled inner-city youth that Tick and Billy try to help, who could have been named plot device. That's how thinly written and cheap his subplot feels. There are more boxing movies than any other sport. Why is that? Especially in an era when the real sport is declining in popularity. It's because of the intrinsic relatability in fighting for something, getting in the ring and trying to defeat not just an opponent, but personal demons. Southpaw enters the long filmography of boxing flicks and puts up a surprisingly good fight. Review. Southpaw. The boxing movie is the ultimate temptation for screen actors keen to prove their macho mettle. Playing a pugilist can be faked, but if you want to look really convincing, you have to pump up. And if things are done authentically, you can never be sure that your pretty face won't be irreversibly modified in the process. The main draw of Antoine Fuqua's Southpaw is the metamorphosis undergone by Jake Gyllenhaal, who spent 5 months in training to transform himself into a lumbering, mumbling slab of battered meatloaf. Gyllenhaal is as intense as you might expect playing champion bruiser Billy Hope, who has it all, loses it all, then hits that much-slogged Hollywood highway redemption road. Despite some ferociously Scorsese-esque effects in the showdowns that bookend the film, Southpaw is closer to Rocky than to Raging Bull, with the script by Sons of Anarchy creator Kurt Sutter warming up a stew of cliches: the orphanage upbringing, the devoted wife, Rachel McAdams, the ascetic guru trainer, Forrest Whitaker, the young daughter Billy must win back. It's like a 1930s ring melodrama tarted up with lifestyle bling and hyper-professional woomph, but it's essentially bantamweight. Southpaw is as blunt as a stiff jab to the face. Predictable from the get-go, it starts off in one direction and never deviates from that path for a long, long time. It pounds you physically, but leaves the internal and emotional untouched and unscathed, spattered with blood and sweat. Director. Antoine Fuqua's Southpaw adopts every cliché till the copyright imaginable. From boxing films of the last several decades, by design, the cinematic boxing ring gives way to intense human drama, often centered on a solitary, flawed, and troubled contender who punches his way through whatever issues he's trying to resolve. Fuqua and screenwriter Kurt Sutter, the Sheila and the Sons of Anarchy, both obsessed with various forms of masculine aggression, create such a formula character in Billy the Great Hope, impressively rendered in a rage-fueled portrayal by Jake Gyllenhaal, a performance around which there's talk of awards consideration. However, the entire film hinges on Gyllenhaal because everything else on screen adopts the worn-out blueprints of every boxing film you've ever seen. Boxing films require a strong leading performance. What would a raging bully be without Robert Darrow, or a Rocket without Sylvester Stallone in his most iconic role? Fuqua conjures a stirring turn from his leading man. And after last year's A Nightcrawler, Gyllenhaal delivers another body. Transforming performance as Billy comes to life through the actor's method style, devotion to pristine physicality, and occasionally unintelligible mumbling. Gyllenhaal lost 15 pounds for the role and drew his skin as tight to his muscle as humanly possible. The result looks like a sculpture of the human musculature. And while Gyllenhaal's body remains ever impressive, the screenplay doesn't give the actor much to do outside of the norm. Billy is overwhelmed with anger, sadness, and rare fits of joy, and not one emotion registers under 11. An undefeated lightweight champion just a few boats away from being punch drunk, Billy lives the high life, though he grew up in the system in Hell's Kitchen alongside his future wife, Maureen Rachel. McAdams, very good. Now they have a plain daughter, Layla Una Lawrence, and remain thankful for their good fortune, much to the chagrin of Billy's scheming, Don King-esque manager, 50 Cent Morin. Wants him to quit while he's ahead, afraid that Billy's angry, defenseless boxing style will leave him brain damaged beyond recognition. And Billy agrees because he loves his wife and child more than anything. But when Maureen is killed during a tragic encounter with one of Billy's would-be challengers, he loses everything, ruined, and on the verge of suicide. Billy neglects his daughter and finances. And soon enough, the courts take Hila away, and Billy is left penniless. In order to get Hila back, he must prove to the court he's a stable father, and so he takes a job cleaning a local gym run by tough love owner Tick Willis, Forrest Whitaker. Having gone from $1 million mansion to a crusty apartment, Billy likewise takes an earthy approach to training, courtesy of Tick, who despises professional boxing. Nevertheless, Tick agrees to train Billy in a boxing style designed to control Billy's senseless rage. He learns strategy and defense, and when quite predictably Billy must re-enter the ring against the fighter who had a hand in Maureen's death, he's a new fighter altogether. With Hila sitting in the dressing room watching her father fight the guy who prompted her mother's death. A Southpaw comes to an unsurprising climax. The fight scenes, though visceral, have been overcut by editor John Rafua, and cinematographer Mauro Fiore seems to have no rhyme or reason to his varied angles and camera placement, except maybe a desperate and ineffective attempt to make the audience feel like we're inside the ring with Billy. There are also at least 2 training montages, one ridiculously set to rapper Eminem's Phenomenal, where 6 weeks of exercise and instructions are glossed over in about 60 seconds of screen time. But training montages come with the territory, as do announcer commentaries during the final bout. These announcers seem to have read the script and highlighted the main plot points. Then they proceed to remind the audience of the stakes, annoyingly suggesting Billy is out for revenge. It's yet another example of how Fuqua overemphasizes everything on screen as opposed to letting the drama in the ring speak for itself. Indeed, though his performance is larger than life and often quite good, Gyllenhaal cannot be blamed for the overcooked quality through how the Southpaw, whose title refers to the unorthodox stance Tech teaches Billy. Fuqua is notorious for going over the top. In his terrorists attack the White House, Yara Olympus has fallen. Gerard Butler threatens the top baddie that he's going to stab him in the brain. And then he does. In Fuqua's adaptation of The Equalizer, Denzel Washington uses everything from hammers to power drills to dispose of mobsters. Fuqua has no time or inclination for subtlety or restrained emotions, so exploring the boxing subgenre seems like a natural choice for him. Unfortunately, Fuqua has resolved to repackage familiar tropes into the kind of manipulative, transparent filmmaking audiences have come to expect from this director, except without anything except Gyllenhaal's fine performance to distract us from how humdrum it all seems. The genre of fighting movies, especially ones centered on boxing, have always been emotionally charged stories about overcoming the odds and having everything come down to one last fight. It makes for great entertainment. And some of my favorite movies actually fall under this category. A Rocket being a classic that I love. And a Bora era is an underrated treasure. T. Southpaw follows in line with the Jake Gyllenhaal of portraying Billy Hope, a champion boxer that has already risen from nothing to become one of the best fighters in the world. The film, then, follows Billy's struggles as everything he loves is taken away from him, and he has to face the toughest fight of his life, At the plot of the film is obviously not one that's wildly original, much like most fighting movies. But it is unique to see this type of film pick up when the protagonist is already at the top of his profession. Billy is the undisputed light heavyweight champion of the world, and everything in his life seems perfect. Until tragedy strikes and his wife, played by Rachel McAdams, is killed. The famed fighter must now face his battle with grief, which is not made easier when his daughter is taken away by child services. Given these circumstances, Southpaw is obviously a very emotional film, and it relies heavily on Gyllenhaal's performance to sell the trauma that his character has endured. Unsurprisingly, Gyllenhaal nails this. He portrays Billy as an absolute train wreck of a man with ease. But the parts I really enjoyed of his performance come when he is in the ring. As Gyllenhaal becomes completely terrifying, he has a dangerous fighting style that is based on him getting beat up pretty badly before relying on his anger to overcome his body and dominate his opponents. The ferocity of Billy comes off as so believable that you will probably be scared of Gyllenhaal for the rest of the film. As this type of film has been done time and time again, a Southpaw should be trying to separate itself through its plot, performances, and directing. While its plot is pretty good and its performances are great, it then comes down to Antoine Fuqua's directing abilities to really sell the film. Keeping in mind that his is the same man that helmed the terrific film at Training Day, my expectations are high when it comes to Fuqua's work. That being said, A Southpaw is directed just fine with flashes of brilliance, really saving it from being too bland of directing. These flashes of brilliance mostly come within the fighting scenes, which of course are necessary to nail in a boxing movie. The fights are presented with great choreography and have fantastic stylistic qualities that highlight Gyllenhaal's terrifying nature. However, there is a slow pace to the film after the first 20 minutes or so, and portions of the film are too mundane in this regard. Between the flashes of brilliance, A Southpaw is made up of routine montages of training, and the presentation style of Billy's fight outside of the ring is pretty standard. While this isn't Fuqua's best effort, he still manages to put together a solid emotional film. At a foundational fast, Southpaw is built on cliché tilde, the copyright story elements, and features a too familiar formulated approach to a tired genre. Carrying the film out of mediocrity is the 1-2 punch of the solid performances led with terrifying execution by Gyllenhaal and Fuqua, doing a good enough job in making the film emotionally moving enough to be memorable. There are still things that could have been improved upon Nina Southpaw, but the end result is a good flick for fans of fighting films or people that want to be scared of Jake Gyllenhaal instead of just really creeped out after watching him in a Nightcrawler. Just the name of Jake Gyllenhaal's character in Southpaw, Billy Hope, tells you this film has no intention of pulling punches when it comes to time-honored boxing movie cliché. Copyright S sometimes glitch a copyright S work, especially when the filmmakers are clear about their intentions. That's exactly what writer Kurt Sutter, Sons of Anarchy: The Shield, and director Antoine Fuqua do at the very beginning of Southpaw. We get a boxing match with the ring announcers providing exposition. Billy Hope is the light heavyweight champion of the world. He's from Hell's Kitchen. His beautiful wife and childhood sweetheart, Maureen Rachel McAdams, and promoter Jordan Maines. 50 Cent root him on from ringside. The announcers also point out, as if we can't see for ourselves, that Billy is taking a beating, but that's Billy's way. Now, think really hard, know of any other cinematic pugilists who would also take a beating until they got their opponent right where they wanted them. Then boom, knockout. That's pretty much what happens here. At a post-fight press conference, contender Miguel Magic Escobar implores Hope to give him some hope and grant him a shot at the title. Again, it's a scene reminiscent of just about every boxing movie you've ever seen. Later, at their palatial estate, we see Billy bond with his daughter Layla, a wonderful young actress named Duna Lawrence, which is adorable, and Then we see Maureen beg Billy to quit the boxing game. She thinks it's starting to take him too long to win fights and fears he's destined to become punch drunk. Then tragedy strikes. Billy loses everything, including his home, his boxing title, and his boxing license. But most importantly, he loses custody of Isla. That's when he turns to boxing trainer Tick Wales, Forrest Whitaker, who owns a gym in Harlem and specializes in helping troubled kids. Tick has his troubles, Billy has his. Seeing Gyllenhaal and Whitaker but heads as they breathe life into those issues is the real fight worth watching here. Everything else is the undercard. These two are heavyweights. An Oscar winner in Whitaker and I believe a future multiple Oscar winner in Gyllenhaal. I'm telling you, Gyllenhaal is the next Daniel D. Lewis. He has become that good. I don't care if they were reciting Rocky line for line. Gyllenhaal alone is more than worth the price of admission. Here in Tuan Fukua, the Equalizer also does what Fukua does best, present a palpable, gritty realism that keeps your eyes glued to the screen and your heart tethered to the story. Southpaw isn't a great movie, but it is a great performance piece, not just for Gyllenhaal and Whitaker, but also for young Lawrence, who practically upstages Gyllenhaal's remarkable work with her earnest, heartbreaking presence. You know those actors you dislike for no reason whatsoever. It isn't based on their acting ability or the movies they've been in. It really is just because their face, their voice, no idea, but they make you witch on mere sight. Jake Gyllenhaal is that for me. I feel his eyes are too close and his surname is difficult to spell. He's also related to a woman named Maggie, which may or may not be the real reason. He almost freaked me out to no end in Donnie Darko. My point here is that I generally tend to avoid him at all costs, and it really isn't because of his acting abilities. Checking out Southpaw was thus a highly questionable venture, as Gyllenhaal is the main character. About 5 minutes in, I was engrossed, and the film made me sweat bullets. Is that accurate to use here? Southpaw uses some cheap tricks for tears or to get their audience aimless, but it works. I was so involved in routing for Billy Hope that I couldn't care less if my favorite actor to hate was in fact Billy Hope. It is a typical rags to riches. Again, you do get the expected training montage with Eminem blasting at the background. You do get a slick manager who is shady as hell. You do get your trainer that lifts your hero from the ground. Is it exhausting because we've seen this 1,000 times? I don't know about the other people, but I was just as invested in Billy's crusade as I was with Rocky Balboa's. Maybe I'm easily influenced and a bit of a softy, but I was there in the ring with him. I enjoy boxing movies and sport movies in general, so I guess I was programmed to appreciate this. I like the soundtrack. It is satisfactory, badass. 50 Cent is about the only cast member who isn't a nail. Above par actor, and since he's cool and I'm a little bit afraid of him, I didn't have any issues particularly. Gyllenhaal does a good job portraying a man that has clawed himself out of the foster care system and built himself an empire. It can't be easy, as I'm pretty sure he's been privileged his entire life, of being nasty again. But there is a roughness to the character that can only come from a life on the wrong side of the tracks. Rachel McAdams manages the same feat as Maureen Billy's wife. There was careful consideration to her character. I don't know how to explain it, but the outfits she wears tells that she grew up somewhere else than her current life might indicate. Oren was a wonderful character. I enjoy Rachel McAdams, but let's face it, she doesn't have many roles that aren't catered to her Southern Belle persona. Maureen isn't a Southern Belle. She's a beautiful woman who grew up on the wrong side of the tracks and managed to build her life up with the man she loves. She's an excellent wife and mother in the center, in Billy's world. Lawrence completes the Hope family as the geeky and sweet child of Billy and Maureen. She was adorable, not irritating as a character, and a huge asset to the team. She made Billy's struggles that much more legitimate and made everyone root all the more for him. She kept tight control of her role for the duration of the film and remained convincing to the very end. I would have loved to see more of Forrest. Whitaker's character. He's a fantastic actor, and taking on the role of Tick Wills couldn't have been the most challenging role he's ever done. And yet he did it with a level of experience that had you wondering who Tick was and what is it that made him train those boys in the gym so hard. Billy Hope doesn't fight like a regular boxer. The reigning light heavyweight champion of the world doesn't bother with defense. Instead, at a certain point in every one of his 43 victories, an opponent's blow will land on his predictably bloodied and battered face. A broken bar awakening some kind of monster inside. No matter how bad it looks, no matter how close it seems, Billy Hope is to being quite literally bludgeoning to death. That Godzilla-like side of his personality are always kicks in eventually, even if it's in the 12th round. Or as one announcer puts it, after another successful and brutal title takedown. Just when you think there's no hope left, here comes Billy. For most of his life, Billy Hope's anger has been his ally. Rage has led to his reign. It's built a life of luxury for him and his wife Maureen, both of whom grew up as orphans in the mean streets of Manhattan's once infamous Hell's Kitchen neighborhood, along with their beloved 10-year-old daughter Layla. But after his latest victory, Billy Hope's anger uncores at exactly the wrong time in exactly the wrong way with exactly the worst consequences. After speaking at a charity event, Billy's confronted by a hungry young contender, Miguel Escobar, who's convinced he can beat the champ in the ring. Billy ignores the man's nasty taunts at first, encouraged by Mo, as Maureen is called to let it go. But when Escobar's trolling jurors vulgarly drag Billy's wife into the mud too, it's too much. The champion erupts. The ensuing begum between the two boxers entourages concludes with a lone errant gunshot that changes everything for Billy Hope, who soon loses nearly everything he's fought so hard for. His sole shot at redemption depends on and unlearning at his unhealthy dependence on Angra both in the ring and out. And doing so means learning to listen to an aging boxing coach from the inner city who's learned a thing or two about redemption himself, positive elements. Mo had been wisely asking Billy to step back a bit from fighting to focus more on Hila. Equally wise, she steadfastly refused to let Hila attend her daddy's fights or even watch them on TV. Mo tells Billy she and Hila are the only people who really care about him and who will be with him after his career is over. And she's rightly Elroy of his tree, manager Jordan Maines, who is manipulating him to keep committing to more fights. After the shooting, Billy Hope is forced to answer one of life's most serious questions. What do we do when we lose everything? Your family, your career, your passion for life itself. An older former boxer named Titus Take Wills helps Billy by giving him a job and by laying down the law regarding Billy's behavior. He has to be punctual, can't swear, can't use drugs or alcohol, and has to be willing to invest in the lives of the inner city. Youth, Tick determined to help in his old gym. It's a humbling process for the boxing great, but slowly Billy submits to this new way of life. And with Tick's help, he learns new boxing skills and begins to get a grip on his anger as well as his substance abuse problem. It's a journey that requires discipline, responsibility, commitment, consistency, and humility. Also, while the film may not intentionally be a critique of boxing's high physical cost, it should be noted that it does take the time to show us the mace of the sport takes on a fighter's body. After one bout, Billy can barely move for days, walking and limping along slowly. Spiritual elements, a sign in the background of Tick's Jim reads In God We Trust. He's shown carrying a Bible in a moment of anguish after one of his young charges is murdered. He laments, God must have some kind of plan to teach me some kind of lesson. I just can't figure out what it is. Tick tells Billy during a fight, God is watching you. Billy offers up a prayer of sorts, either to God or to someone who has died. A funeral is presided over by a priest. Sexual romantic content. Bikini-clad women strut across the ring with round number signs. Billy's shown sitting naked in a shower. We see all of his unclothed torso from the side. Mo wears outfits that reveal cleavage. We see her in a bra, tong, and an unbuttoned robe as she's getting dressed. After a match, she flirts suggestively with her husband, sucking on his finger, and there's talk of them going to rounds. She climbs on top of him, lifting her dress to reveal her underwear. They embrace and kiss. Violent content. The boxing is intense and bloody as Billy trades blows with his opponents. Scenes are filled with jarring body shots and punches to the head. Billy especially has a propensity for getting wounded. Above his left eye, his forehead bleeding profusely and repeatedly. After the fights, we see him repeatedly spit out massive amounts of blood. His bruises worsen and his bloodshot left eye practically swells shut. There are piles of blood-drenched towels. When Miguel insults and baits Billy after the charity event, Billy goes after him and the gloves-free melee erupts. The gunshot kills someone, producing panic, anguish, and lots of blood. An inebriated Billy perhaps tries to commit suicide by ramming his car into a tree on his estate. His daughter discovers him lying in the entryway to their house, bleeding. He had butts a boxing referee, badly injuring the man's nose and face. Losing custody of Isla, Billy loses control and has to be physically restrained by multiple police officers. He angrily confronts a woman, pointing a loaded gun at her in an attempt to ascertain Miguel's whereabouts. He seems close to shooting her until her children run up and hug her, which seems to bring him back to a more restrained reality. He destroys his trophy room in yet another age. We hear that an adolescent from Tick's gym was murdered by his father when the young man tried to protect his mother from his dad's assault of her. Leela slaps her father's face 4 times as she screams, "I hate you," crude or profane language. More than 75 Fords, including nearly a dozen, paired with Mother close to 40s. 2 uses of Paw Y and 1 of Boss CHEs added nearly 10 times of 5 or 6 times. God's Name is paired with Dan. Drug alcohol content. A banquet includes wine. It's increasingly clear Billy is trying to cope via alcohol, and it's suggested but not shown with drugs. 2. Tick tells him he has to get clean if he's going to work and eventually train at his gym. But it turns out Tick's got a drinking problem of his own that he's apparently struggling to kick both a man or Sean drinking in a bar, but Tick isn't interested in sharing a drink with Billy, telling him drinking is a solitary sport. Other note for the elements, we see Billy vomit. Jordan Maines betrays and abandons Billy just as Mo predicted. It said that Maines paid off at least one fighter to throw a boat in Billy's favor. Conclusion. What is it about boxing movies? If there's a genre better suited to narratives that naturally sift themes such as pride and humiliation, loss, and redemption, I'm not sure what it is. Perhaps that's because most boxing movie has a take-your-pick from a rocket to a raging bull at a fight rate to the boxer, a Cinderella mono to the competist, till their pugilist protagonist struggles into 2 of the most primal conflicts a man can face. A physical war with a savage opponent determined to beat him unconscious, and a parallel inner war with haunting failures equally determined to beat him hopeless with so much conflict going on. I suppose it's no surprise that boxing movies often trade in critique, bruising realism. And so it is with the Southpaw, a poignant redemptive story that's also wincingly bait in brutality and vulgarity. This is the kind of story that pulls you into watching, but is so intense in some moments, both in terms of its pull, no punches, boxing scenes, and Billy Hope's similarly painful interactions with his emotionally wounded daughter, that you need to look away. Jab after jab of harsh profanity and bloody boxing imagery mean this movie ultimately takes the same kind of beating on screen that Billy Hope does in the ring. Monday, July 20th, I go to the premiere of Southpaw, which was a pain in the ass to get unto. In of itself, let me tell you something. Security guards are the scum of the earth. Last premiere, they upped my picture and said, "Oh, it's all right." Now I get threatened of getting kicked out just because of waiting to take a picture with a celebrity. Nobody came, but it was wait. I saw Cameron Monaghan again and got a picture. I wasn't even shameless to ask and left with the South Block app. Boxer Billy Hope turns to trainer Tick Willis to help him get his life back on track after losing his wife in a tragic accident, and his daughter to Child Protection Services. Alan Fuqua is one of the most skilled directors who can hop into every genre and make something cool out of it. He went from buddy cop to dumb action, epic action to somewhat smart action. And now he directed a boxing film, a non-Fuqua boxing film that is triumphant in the acting portion, but is incredibly weak in the story. If this was an 80s film, this would have been a revolutionary boxing drama. But since we're in 2015, where countless of other revolutionary boxing films have been released, this is going to be lost in a gutter 10 years from now. Doa acting in the film is great, though. Jake Gyllenhaal is fantastic in this. Seeing him transition from a up guy who has all his together Nightcrawler to a guy who lost everything and get his together is remarkable. Gyllenhaal shows that he has more range than you expect. If you thought his acting peaked in Nightcrawler, you thought wrong. He brings the emotional beats through a majority in the scene. Two other strong powerhouses in this are Forrest Whitaker and Duna Lawrence. Whitaker's old yet wise lines of dialogue are cliched, but the way he delivers is amazing. Even when the movie took unnecessary turns, he was there to bring emotion. Una also delivers the emotion too. But for a very young actress, it hits you 2 acts as hard. You can relate and feel with her issues. Fuqua also does a great job directing the boxing scenes where there are moments where seeing the punches blown to another person's face is actually brutal and graphic. Even the last punch you see in the movie makes you goddamn. The film's huge problem is that it hits all the notes and plot points of 94% of all boxing comeback story movies. It manages to be a bit original, but then immediately goes to generic territory, New York. In the visceral boxing drama Southpaw, Weinstein, a seasoned trainer, tries to convince a broken-down fighter that boxing is more mental than physical. A successful practitioner of the sweet science must use his head and strategize. Thinking is more important than punching. No doubt boxing has a cerebral dimension. Fighting smart, at least smarter than one's opponent, is better than the alternative. But the express aim of the inherently violent game is to hurt the other guy physically. Outthinking him is a means to inflicting more bodily damage than you receive. If the viewer comes away believing that anyone who chooses to box is not very smart, or rather is opting to use his or her head in the dumbest of ways, it doesn't mean softball is a failure. On the contrary, it is so. Effective at depicting the toll exacted by the sport, that boxing becomes a source of fascination. No matter how seemingly irrational and barbaric as in most boxing flicks, boxing is both the problem and the solution at a source of the protagonist's woes and the vehicle for his or her redemption. And yet, because violence is at the root of the game, Southpaw is inescapably, if not completely problematic on a moral level. Also, the audience is pummeled by a near constant barrage of profanity. The advice about using one's mind instead of wildly unloading on your adversary is offered to the title character Billy Hope, light heavyweight champion of the world, played by a chiseled Jake Gill. And Hale, Billy is first seen preparing to enter the ring for a major bout. According to the rap song written and performed by Eminem, blaring on the soundtrack, he's a beast. He's reached the pinnacle of boxing because he fights like a maniac with no regard for his own safety. He puts up little defense and gets pulverized, but he always withstands the onslaught and finds a way to win. In their gaudy suburban mansion, after this fight, Billy's 10-year-old daughter, Una Lawrence, ritualistically counts all the wounds on his face. He's bruised and battered. It takes hours for the blood to stop oozing from his nose and mouth, and days for his left eye to stop glowing like red marble. But he's the champ. Billy and his wife, Maureen Rachel McAdams, met as ping orphans in the Hell's Kitchen section of Manhattan. They're deeply in love, and she's his biggest supporter. But she can no longer let him endure the punishment. She urges him to retire, or at least take a break. You're going to be punched drunk in 2 years if you keep this up. She argues, presumably aware he already appears at all day, perpetually woozy, to the point people frequently assume he's inebriated or high on drugs. Then tragedy strikes. Billy is dealt wrenching blow outside the ring. In the aftermath of this personal crisis, his manager Jordan Maines, played with a believable mix of charm and menace by the rapper Curtis 50 Cent. Jackson is no help. Billy loses all of his money, his house, and just about everything he holds dear. Can he wise up and channel his sorrow and rage into productive behavior? Humbled and emotionally fragile, he makes his way to the ratty inner-city gym run by Titus Tequilus, Forrest Whitaker, a no-nonsense trainer, who agrees to teach him during the first third of the movie. Director Antoine Fuqua Training Day does a masterful job of making the brutal allure of boxing as palpable as the bond between Marine and Billy. Grittily realistic camera work and tremendous acting by Gyllenhaal and McAdams contribute to an atmosphere that's both alluring and heartfelt. There's no attempt to analyze Billy's masochistic personality. The images, many featuring copious amounts of blood, say enough. What follows is more melodramatic and less compelling. Billy's professional comeback happens too easily, and his emotional recovery, including a painful domestic situation, is implausibly linked to his return to the ring. The all-important character of Tick is not fully formed despite Whitaker's solid efforts, and despite getting some of the choicer lines in Kurt Sutter's script by telling of a man who makes his living by being violent and is brought low by a violent act, then saves himself by engaging in further, albeit more tactical violence. Southpaw tries to have it both ways. How can a cautionary tale about violence offer violence as the answer? This question pertains to the genre tropes of boxing, movies, and storytelling conventions in general. It also mirrors the puzzle surrounding this anachronistic sport. How can we be drawn to boxing and repelled by it at the same time? The film contains pervasive, rough, crude, and crass language, much bloody boxing violence, brief foreplay prior to a married couple's off-screen lovemaking, a character on the verge of suicide, a scene of gun violence, an instance of partial male nudity, and some drinking. The Catholic News Service classification is LA, limited adult audience films, whose problematic content many adults would find troubling. The Motion Picture Association of America rating is RA. Restricted under 17, requires accompanying parent or adult guardian. The gritty trailers for this boxing drama were a pretty compelling selling point for me, promising ultra-kinetic fight scenes coupled with an appropriately brooding ambience. What's more, Jake Gyllenhaal is quickly becoming one of my favorite actors, having displayed over time a commitment to method acting on par with Christian Bale. See, for example, The Machinist A, greater than Batman Begins. Gyllenhaal's had a very strong run of films lately of Prisoners and Nightcrawler are particular standouts, and I was eager to see his transformation into a boxing star. The plot of Southpaw is standard inspirational drama fare. Boxing's current light heavyweight champion, the unsettlingly named Billy Hope Gyllenhaal, falls from glory after a tragic accident involving his wife. Rachel McAdams, a subsequent downward spiral results in his loss of custody of his daughter, catalyzing a personal transformation and Hope's ultimate return to the ring, etc., etc. Southpaw doesn't break much new ground where plot depth is concerned. I'm not always the biggest fan of sports films, but I certainly enjoyed South like many movies in the genre. It's loaded with cliché dilda copyright. So this is a fairly standard riches rags redemption narrative populated by stock characters, but it's redeemed by Gyllenhaal's all-in commitment to his role alongside a no-holds-barred approach to thematic content. Just as a Nightcrawler, Gyllenhaal brings a white-knuckle energy to the screen. He's as compelling as a hard-scrabble kid turned boxer as he was in portraying a glib-talking sociopath in last year's Thriller. The central role here demands a grueling physicality, and Gyllenhaal more than delivers in a dramatic change from his usual Gone Sentinel-type roles. Further, the film's R rating allows director Antoine Fuqua to pull no punches in every sense of the term. These boxing matches are brutal, bloody confrontations shot with the breathless intensity. This ruthlessness actually works to the movie's great advantage. Despite the familiar plot beats, the film doesn't feel focus group to appeal to the largest possible demographic. Additionally, there are new Eminem songs, of one of which plays over a Rocky style training montage, and they're spectacular. I'm generally of the opinion that motivational Eminem songs improve any athletic drama. It's almost superfluous to say at this point, but there is nothing approaching subtlety or underlying commentary in Southpaw, although it's potentially worth noting that the Child Protective Services bureaucracy comes off looking pretty awful. This movie works not on a cerebral level, but on a gut level. It's the type of film that makes one want to go out and fight a bear single-handedly. I'm fully of the belief that in an era of CGI-drenched extravagances, that kind of raw human drama still has a place. I love a good boxing movie, from the early films such as Sarakia and The Raging Bullet to the more recent masterpieces of The Fight and A $1 Million Baby. The sport of boxing as a cinematic device is special because it centers on one person, sometimes two, and allows us to tag along on their emotional journey. In just 2 hours of film, you can see and feel every moment of frustration, turmoil, happiness, love, and hatred leading up to the final fight. Once that fight arrives, whether it is in the ring or otherwise, they have your complete attention, depending on the actor, of course. While every film I have mentioned so far has main characters that you may or may not relate to, their lives are so intriguing that you either want to see them enjoy some manner of success or at least be there for the eventual demise. In fact, these movies have less to do with boxing and more to do with studying flawed characters overcoming adversity, accompanied by a brilliant score, such is the case with our latest film, Southpaw, directed by Antoine Fuqua, Billy Hope. Jake Gyllenhaal is an undefeated, wealthy boxing champion with a beautiful wife, Rachel McAdams, and daughter after his wife dies in a shooting accident. The emotional shortcomings of Billy surface, and he begins to make destructive mistakes. Not only does he lose his boxing manager, Curtis Jackson, and his career, his debts cause the bank to auction his home and belongings, and Child Protective Services take away his daughter, Una Lawrence. At the end of his rope, Billy must now learn to make peace with himself and work towards getting his daughter back. He finds guidance in a boxing gym run by a gruff, wise instructor named Forrest Whitaker. Teaches Billy to control his emotions in and out of the ring. Together they learn that second chances are only as real as you want them to be. I was very impressed by the slow, methodical pace of the underlying story between Billy and Leyland. The boxing matches become secondary, and all you really want to see are these two together again. Not an easy goal, but if there is one thing Billy is focused on, it is his daughter. While we see all the pain and suffering that Billy is going through, we also see that bleed into Hila's life, how her emotions begin to turn against her father, she resents him for all their tragic misfortunes, and her only solace is in the friends she makes at the care facility she calls home. A girl once shielded from her father's fights, now facing traumatic situations, and a father holding on to that shaken but enduring bond between them. If you wanted to make comparisons, you could say this movie is like a Rocky 3A in reverse riches to rag. Story A, except with the shot at redemption placed in the third act where it belongs. The comparisons in there, because Billy Hope is not Rocky Balboa, while Rocky's wife helped him become a better man. Billy's wife had a harder time getting through to him about what is important. The rewards of success further cloud this issue. With his family separated and his career in shambles, this film could not emphasize the need to reevaluate his priorities enough. The chemistry between Jake Gyllenhaal and Forrest Whitaker is remarkable. Fuqua has a way of making his characters feel like old friends even when they argue. Do the conversations between these two come off so naturally that you become further engaged in the outcome? Dots are not the only standout performances in the movie because Una Lawrence's scenes and interactions with Gyllenhaal are impressive for such a new actor. The emotional transition that Lawrence makes during this movie is terrific. She exudes empathy and compassion on screen, and I imagine has a lot more talent to show us in the future. I could not possibly review a boxing movie without bringing up the music. Besides a few well-placed rap songs, the most impactful sounds are courtesy of the late James Horner. Horner's musical score adds step to an already emotional film and makes several moments shine brighter by its presence. Bill Conti's work on the original Rocky was a work of art, and I feel the same way about this piece. When we see Billy in the ring for the last time, the actions that led to this moment build up our excitement, but the music takes it to another level. Southpaw beyond Tuan Phuc was best at work to date. I always feel that his work skirts the border between a superficial melodrama and a heartfelt story of flawed people. In the end, it works, and works well. The music and cinematography complement this film. Forrest with the crew is great and plays a more subtle version of Mickey. No offense to Burgess Meredith, Gyllenhaal gives an outstanding performance as well. As range and ability continue to impress, add a new on-screen jam. Moon Lawrence is also a pleasure. Even if you are not a fan of boxing, this movie will still entertain you. Do it in tackles. Heavy issues and somehow is fun and humorous at times. Do I recommend you see this film in theaters for not only the reasons stated above, but also to hear one of her final works in surround sound. It's worth it. Everybody loved Jake Gyllenhaal. He's been on it year. Since don't add Denis Villeneuve as a prisoner saw in 2013, and since then, everybody wants to see him in everything. It's only fair because he's a versatile and dedicated performer can make almost anything better. Gyllenhaal can't make everything better, though. He definitely couldn't save from its shitty screenplay. Perhaps I loathe this movie because I box and I understand the business a little better than most people, but a collaboration between star director Antoine Fuqua, creator of Fast, Sons of Enrique, Kurt Satra, and the Jake Freak and Gyllenhaal shouldn't be this bad. Billy Hopia, Jake Gyllenhaal is the undisputed and undefeated light heavyweight champion of life, a form of boxing where blocking, slipping, and ducking your opponent's punches is not allowed, so he wins a lot of fights but takes a whole lot of punishment, to which worries his wife and most trusted advisor, Maureen Rachel McAdams. She doesn't want her husband to be punched drunk at her daughter's prom, and to be honest, he kind of already is. When Maureen is accidentally killed in a scuffle between Billy's entourage and contender Miguel Escobar's, everybody is ganging up on the great ... as I too hope to take an extra fight so that they can make money off him one more time. Okay, let's talk about the boxing. First, an undisputed world champion shouldn't be punched drunk or be taking that much punishment in the first place. I mean, just look at real-life boxing champion Gennady Gol of Canaring. Through They Are Feared Men, Southpaw also introduces the concept of defense at the very end of the movie. Once again, there are boxers with no defense, but world champions didn't get to where they are by blocking punches with their face. Jake Gyllenhaal sells the broken tough guy character well enough, but a man like a Billy Hopia doesn't have the profile of a world champion. That's just stupid. Melodramatic writing, and this is something no acting talent can fix. Hey, I know what you're going to tell me. Ben, you obsessive-compulsive, this is a detail. People who aren't following boxing don't care about that. Maybe so, but the non-boxing scenes aren't any better. The inciting incident, the accidental death of Billy's wife, Maureen, happens in a ridiculous public brawl. I was laughing out loud when fists started flying. Maureen's death is not only ridiculous and far-fetched, but it's a MacGuffin that triggers the entire narrative of the movie, which goes way, way over the top. With the redemption angle, Billy loses his wife, his home, his kids' custody, moves into a crummy apartment, and starts training in an inner-city gym. Not only the speed at which Billy's life falls apart is ridiculous, but everything that happens after Maureen's death is exactly what you would expect from a boxing movie. It's basically the plot of Rocky III. So there you have it. A Southpaw is a poorly written, ridiculous, and predictable dud, which I didn't expect from a renowned screenwriter like Kurt Sutter. That kind of explains why the well has dried for him since then. He's only worked on a series I've never heard of, and now he's preparing an offshoot of Sons of Anarchia for next year. No more movies for Kurt. It's too bad because the character of Fab Billy Hopia is different from what you usually get in boxing movies. He has a rugged edge and a brokenness to him that a Jake Gyllenhaal sells admirably well. I think he watched a lot of Mike Tyson's preparation for it. Anyway, a Southpaw is terrible, but not terrible enough that it's actually fun. Let that one fall into oblivion. Your time will be best invested elsewhere. Let me explain why this nickname is the worst. They're used to be something in boxing called the Great White Hope. Promoters were always looking for the next great white boxer to market to white audiences, which they thought were the only one that could afford their tickets. But that was in the days where they hang black people in the South that has no business in a 21st century boxing movie. Shame on you, Kurt. Sutter, Southpaw is a movie I was very excited to see, more so for Jake Gyllenhaal's performance rather than the movie itself. From the trailer, it looked like a very sentimentalized boxing movie, which is not something I immediately object to, but I was a bit wary. It turns out those reservations weren't unfounded, but I enjoyed the movie even while recognizing the drawbacks, most of which lie with the script. Billy Hope, Jake Gyllenhaal, is the light heavyweight boxing champion of the world. When his wife, Rachel McAdams, is shot and killed in an altercation with a rival boxer and his entourage. When Billy loses his wife, he loses everything, drowning in self-pity and near suicidal. The state takes custody of his 12-year-old daughter, Layla Una Lawrence. His promoter, 50 Cent, drops him. He falls into debt, and his house is foreclosed on. He gets back into boxing with the help of small-time boxing trainer Tequila's Forrest Whitaker to earn a living and prove to the court that he is responsible enough to take care of his daughter. The frustrating thing about a Southpaw is that you can see the foundations of a much better movie lurking behind all the obvious sentimentality and boxing movie tropes. Most people I have talked to and most reviews I have read seem to agree that the beginning belongs to a much better movie. The dynamic between Billy and his wife, the examination of what drives Billy to fight and how he goes about doing it are compelling and interesting, even if they might not be super revolutionary in the genre. There's an element of self-harm inherent in any boxing movie, and the Southpaw sort of puts it up front, especially when it's combined with the death of Morin. But for whatever reason, the film gets bogged down in a very traditional boxing narrative and stops investigating Billy. Hope's psyche and the film suffers for it. What they're left with is a somewhat sappy and very standard boxing film, which I don't have a huge problem with because I like boxing movies. However, the film still falls short because of how sentimental it is. It overplays its hand emotionally, offering some cringe-inducing moments, most of them, involving the character flat out stating their emotions. Simply cutting out these lines would have helped the picture tremendously. We really don't need Layla to say something along the lines of, "I wish you had died instead of Mom." We really, really don't. The good news is that if you just sort of bear with these terrible line scenes, the film goes along a familiar but effective boxing sports movie trajectory that is easy to get behind. I have mixed feelings on how the film is shot by Pamro Fiore, whose most impressive credit is probably James Cameron Avatar. I love the callbacks to A Raging Bull, one of my favorite films of all time. It makes sense, not just because they are both boxing movies, but because Pawa does have the element of self-destruction that A Raging Bull, granted, explores 1,000,000 times better. I think I picked out at least 2 shots from the ring that were directly copied from A Raging Bull. A Southpaw does a good job pulling back from the fights to establish geography, and slow motion wasn't other used, thankfully. However, the editing did get a bit quick during the fights, and it never got completely incomprehensible, but came damn close a couple of the times. The rest of the movie is pretty standard for the most part. Though, to go back to the boxing scenes, there's one shot of Gyllenhaal screaming at the camera that recalls the actor's previous film, The Fantastic Nightcrawler. And it all comes back to Gyllen, as per usual, turns in wonderful performance. I was very disappointed that he wasn't Oscar nominated for A Night Grower last year, and was hoping he'd get one this year since the fanatical campaigner Harvey Weinstein seems to be behind it. Critics aren't really taking to the film, which has me worried, but I'm still rooting for him, obviously. Gyllenhaal, kind of like Tom Hardy, has a great ability to sort of play leading man roles as a character actor might. They both develop such individual, chameleon-like performances, but still have the weight and gravitas to anchor a film. I can almost go through every performance of Gyllenhaal's I've seen, recent ones anyway, not so much when he was a child actor, and point out some specific takes of each. I think he's actually been better in other films, but he still embodies a completely different character here from anything I've seen from him before, though, is my down by the script a bit. So Southpaw may ultimately be disappointing, but I ended up enjoying myself reasonably well while watching it. I really wish that the film had thrown the come-from-behind boxing narrative into the background and brought the character study more to the foreground. But even so, the film ends up being an entertaining enough film to catch on cable on a slow afternoon or something. I'm not sure about Gyllenhaal's Oscar chances, but we'll see. In short, A Southpaw could have been a lot better, but it also could have been a lot worse, and I had fun with it anyway. Connoisseurs of boxing sometimes wax eloquent on the nuances of the sport, but boxing movies tend to value impact over finesse. Few genres are so reliably and bluntly conventional primal stories. They rise and fall, ruin and redemption, the love of a good woman. They are punctuated by scenes of carefully choreographed pugilism, violence, and sentimentality. Dance in the ring, and the audience leaves satisfied, if not exactly surprised. If Antoine Fuqua's new film, Southpaw, were a boxer, it would be a lot like its hero, a light heavyweight named Billy Hope, played with downcast eyes and rock-hard abs by Jake Gyllenhaal. Billy is a bleeder and a brawler, an earnest, inarticulate guy with a ferocious punch and not much in the way of grace. In case his last name isn't a broad enough hint, you might take a moment to read his tattoos. Fighter and Father are scrolled along his sinew forearms. His back says, "Fear no man." Only ironically and late in the game do the words Great White precede his name. Not that Billy has much privilege to check, racial or otherwise. We first encounter him defending his title with a late-round knockout at Madison Square Garden, which an announcer notes is a few blocks and also 1,000,000 miles from the Hell's Kitchen orphanage where the champ grew up. His wife, Maureen Rachel McAdams, is also a product of the foster care system, and they've gone to great lengths to ensure that their beloved 10-year-old daughter, Layla Una Lawrence, is protected from the kind of life they call new. Billy throws the punches, and Maureen, as he puts it, makes all the plans. But you can't plan for every hot twist of fate, unless you're a screenwriter, of course, and the author of the Southpaw script, Kurt Sutter, too, works this baby until it screams. A loudmouth challenger, Miguel Gomez, taunts Billy at a charity event. Words are exchanged, fists fly, and a gunshot robs Billy of everything he has. He loses his wife, his mansion, his cars, his title, and custody of Ela, who is placed in child services limbo under the eye of a social worker played by Nami. Harris, abandoned by his manager, Curtis Jackson, better known as 50 Cent. Billy sets out to take back what he can. He walks into a scruffy New York gym and finds a battered philosophical trainer named Willis with the melancholy mien of Forrest Whitaker. Call A Southpaw 48. There isn't really much more you need to know. The plotting is somehow both flat-footed and operatic in its sick absurdity. Character arcs are tangled, flattened, and forehortened. Common sense is not silly, But Mr. Fuqua has never been a director to let ridiculousness get in the way of visceral action with a new Eminem song tucked into one of the montages, an old-style melodramatic score by a James Horner, one of his last. Sadly, he died in June. And the film is dedicated to his memory and plenty of muscular brawling. Southpaw is effective without being terribly convincing. The same goes for Mr. Gyllenhaal, whose recent performances have been both impressive and more than a little mannered day boats of showy extremism in Southpaw. His mumbling seems as Stia's as his Phidias enunciation in Nightcrawler. His physicality feels more natural than his diction. Though watching Billy train for a fight or struggle to stand up straight, the next day you believe you are witnessing the discipline and agony of a real boxer. And you're definitely watching a real boxing movie, which is, of course, not the same as a movie about the reality of the sport, despite participation by the former Maui champion Roy Jones Jr., who plays himself. Even biopics about practitioners of the sweet science, Raging Bull partly accepted, have a habit of preferring formula to verisimilitude. But while Southpaw sings a familiar tune, it features some pretty appealing players. There are worse things to see at the multiplex than Miss McAdams playing a tough cookie standing by her man, or Mr. Whitaker speaking hard truths over a glass of whiskey, or a battered Bible, or 50 Cent smiling sharkishly in a beautiful suit. It wouldn't be a fight picture without a ruthless businessman, a gruff coach, or a suffering wife. And this wouldn't be a review of a boxing picture without a fugal-ailed copyrights of its own. I wish I could say Southpaw was a knockout, or even a contender that it went the distance or scored on points, but it's strictly an undercard bow, displaying enough heart and skill to keep the paying customers from getting too restless. I'll put it out there that I have pretty much disliked every movie with Jake Gyllenhaal I have ever seen. A. Bubble Boy, The Day After Tomorrow, Brokeback Mountain Brothers, pass. He always seemed like a really good actor. I just couldn't stand any of his roles. I couldn't relate to or root for any of his characters in the slightest. But I feel like Gyllenhaal was made for this movie. He plays the role amazingly. Basically, it's a rags to riches story. After the riches, Billy Hope, Gyllenhaal, and his wife were orphans raised in the system without a dime to their name. They meet, fall in love, get married, and have a kid. He becomes a champion boxer, provides an amazing life for his family. Sounds good, the end, and it would have been except for a series of crappy events that befalls him and his family instead of rags to riches. This is actually a story of fair redemption. I often hear about fighting that what matters most is getting back up on your feet when you've been knocked down. Billy Hope doesn't just get knocked down in the ring, but he gets utterly knocked down in life and has to learn how to piece it back together and fight his way back physically, emotionally, and figuratively. Kurt Sutter's mention for gritty dramas really translates well from the TV set to the big screen. I'm not sure how much experience he has away from television series, like he is Sons of An-Ra and The Shield, but he did a phenomenal job writing the story for a Southpaw in true Solder fashion. Kurt took your favorite character's life and turned it on its head, though Solder is not quite as merciless with main characters as, say, George R.R. Martin, director on Fuqua, is no stranger to action and drama, making such movies A Training Day, A Shooter, and The Equalizer. He did an amazing job, squeezing every inch of talent of his cast. Jake Gyllenhaal, Rachel McAdams, and Forrest Whitaker are all seasoned actors, so the bar was pretty high and they soared right past it. Even Curtis Jackson, 50 Cent, who only moonlights as an actor, carried his weight on screen. The story is pretty straightforward, and we've seen it dressed up differently with other movies like He of the Fighter, A Warrior, and The Rocky. So there's really no surprise or award for originality. But Southpaw is still a very enjoyable movie and worth seeing. It's probably the biggest fight movie we'll see for a while until the Rocky spin-off movie Ada hits theaters later in 2015. So if you've got the itch to see guys kick the crap out of each other, go catch a South plot. Boxing movie is the ultimate temptation for screen actors keen to prove their macho mettle. Playing a pugilist can be faked, but if you want to look really convincing, you have to pump. And if things are done authentically, you can never be sure that your pretty face won't be irreversibly modified in the process. The main draw of Antoine Fuqua's Southpaw is the metamorphosis undergone by Jake Gyllenhaal, who spent 5 months in training to transform himself into a lumbering, mumbling slab of battered meatloaf. Gyllenhaal is as intense as you might expect, playing champion bruiser Billy Hope, who has it all, loses it all, then hits that much slugged Hollywood highway redemption road. Despite some ferociously scores, yes, effects in the showdowns, that book and the film A Southpaw is closer to Araka than to Raging Bull, with the script by a Sons of Anarchy creator. Kurt Sutter warming up a stew of cliches, the orphanage upbringing, the devoted wife Rachel McAdams, the aesthetic guru trainer Forrest Whitaker, the young daughter Billy must win back a broken bar. It's like a 1930s Ring melodrama, tarted up with lifestyle bling and hyper. Professional woomph, but it's essentially bantamweight. Rumor has it that Southpaw was originally intended as a vehicle for rap meester Eminem, which would account for the film's brawling, bruising hip-hop dynamic. But if it's true, it also explains why this is not just a testosterone and soaked tale of triumph through violence. True, it doesn't flinch from the effects of boxing, both short-term and long-term. But Southpaw isn't an epic Raging Bull-style rise and fall story with blood and guts. Instead, it's an intimate study of a man whose demons threaten to take away the most precious thing in his life, his daughter. Still, it's hard to imagine anyone but Jake Gyllenhaal not only fleshing out the role of Billy Ho, but lifting such seasoned material to another level. In fact, without Jill and Hale, it's hard to imagine Southpaw being made as all. If we ignore some of the more glaringly awkward plot points, we are left with a pretty standard sports story in which a once proud champion must return to his humble roots and start again. Surprisingly, Gyllenhaal never really nails the gritty Hell's Kitchen street kid aspect, mostly because he seems too smart and vain to make some of the dimmer choices Billy makes. But his physical work is amazing. The fights, though flashily edited from multiple angles, are not just convincing in themselves, they sell and advance the storyline. When Billy is confident, the moves are broad, swift, and assured. When he's mentally disintegrating, he becomes feral, unpredictable, wild. And in the final stretch, when he's desperately trying to make his way back to the top, that's when things get really interesting. Billy Hope is so overpowering that most of the supporting players struggle to register. Rachel McAdams gives his wife a flicker of depth, playing Maureen as a woman who, though concerned for his safety, perhaps enjoys Billy's wealth that little bit too much. In the mentor role as world-weary trainer Titus at Tick Wheels, Forrest Whitaker wisely avoids cliché, the copyright, by turning things down a notch. A move also employed by Curtis A. 50 Cent Jackson as Billy's unscrupulous manager Jordan. After Jill Hale, Billy has the best character to work with, the slick-ailed copyright mine, and cries whose dedication to Billy doesn't last long when the debt collectors call. If Gyllenhaal hadn't pulled it off, these flaws would seem much more heinous than they do. Instead, this stands as another terrific performance from an actor on a roll. Southpaw may not match up to the criminally underrated Nightcrawler, but what does with its much more Academy-friendly themes of family and responsibility, this could finally be the film that bags him the Oscar. Yesterday, I watched Southpaw, and I absolutely loved it. I just want to get this out of the way and say that if you have any interest in seeing this movie, even if you don't have an interest in seeing this movie, stop reading this review right now and go watch it. I'm not going to be talking spoilers in this review, but nevertheless, Southpaw is a movie that benefits from a completely blind viewing. So Southpaw is a movie about a boxer, but the way that the story is presented is kind of unorthodox. Well, not really unorthodox, but unusual. You see, when it comes to sports movies, they all center around the same thing. The main character trying to be the best. They have to go from being nothing to being everything. This is usually accomplished by starting off when this character is nothing. But every once in a while, you'll get a movie that starts when the character is already on top of the world, then beat them down to nothing so we can get the traditional story. Southpaw is the latter. The hurt that the character of Billy Hope has to go through before the movie decides that it is time for him to get his due is astounding. Watching life give him the worst beating that he has ever suffered is something that is so painful, but at the same time so beautiful. This beauty comes from Jake Gyllenhaal's performance as Billy Hope. Gyllenhaal manages to channel a man that is beyond broken. We see this amazing inner struggle as Hope's life is falling apart around him, and he just wants to succumb to it. But at the same time, he has to stay strong for his daughter, and that's just the big picture stuff. Gyllenhaal is also great at the subtleties in his performance as well. Billy Hope has a unique fighting style, one that involves his getting punched in the face and head repeatedly until he gets mad enough to kick the out of his opponent. And of course, with that would come some, let's say, complications. Billy Hope isn't punch drunk yet, but he's getting close. The way that Gyllenhaal plays Hope is amazing because you can just tell that something is off. He slurs his words, he mumbles, he has trouble focusing. All of these things add up to a wonderful picture that Gyllenhaal is able to paint with his performance. Southpaw also features a great performance by Forest Whitaker. But this praise comes with a caveat. Southpaw is not a new movie. It features a story that we have seen 1,000 times before. I'm fine with this because I'm of the mindset that there are no new stories, just variations of stories that have already been told 1,000 times before. But still, it is something I have to acknowledge. Even though I love the story of Southpaw, I have to admit that some of it fell into cliché till the copyright territory. A large part of this is with Whitaker's performance. Now, maybe that's not the best way to put it because they really did like the way Whitaker played his character. But everything surrounding his character was essentially a cliché, told the copyright grizzled boxing coach who is rough around the edges but has a heart of gold, scared to get mixed up in the big times for one reason or another, but overcomes this fear because he cares so much for the person he is training. It's straight out of every sports movie ever. That being said, I did like it, and despite it feeling a little trite at times, it did win me over. Another thing I really appreciated about Southpaw was the fight cinematography in the movie, especially during the film's very first fight. The way the film immersed you into the experience was beautiful. It really made everything stand out and highlighted how beautiful and intense boxing can be. Now, unfortunately, Southpaw peaked early in this regard, because later on we start to run into a few issues with the way the action in the ring was shot. While early on this film managed to capture the beauty and intensity of the sport, the later fights in the film felt almost too intentionally disorientating. You can absolutely argue that this was the film's way of immersing you even further into the mind of Billy Hope, but that didn't come across as the intention. The cuts were quick and rather confusing. And to even further the confusion, the film decided to use a weird mix of paw shots, which were cool but just added to me deciding to wait until a wide shot to figure out what was happening. Really, the biggest issue I had with Southpaw was that, in hindsight at least, the ending seemed to be a little rushed. This is probably due to a few things. One, the movie had to make sure the character of Billy Hope was completely broken before it could rebuild him. And two, the actual plot of the movie comes out of nowhere. So the movie doesn't really start until about 20 minutes in. Both of these reasons are actually why I love the movie in the first place. So I'm not exactly mad that the ending felt rushed, but it is apparent, especially when looking back on the movie. Overall, Southpaw is one hell of an experience. Sure, the story is a little familiar, but it's different enough that I was engaged throughout. And the phenomenal performances, especially by Gyllenhaal, make up for any of the writing shortcomings. Southpaw stars Jake Gyllenhaal, Forrest Whitaker, Rachel McAdams, and is a film that focuses on the redemption of a world boxing champion, Billy Hope, played by Gyllenhaal. After a series of the tragic events forces his life on a downward spiral, in turn causing Billy to strive to become a responsible father. Southpaw has, to my surprise, gained mixed critical response, holding out at 59% on Rotten Tomatoes 6/10s. I believe this is down to it embracing genre cliches like the quote above explains. There are certain things we know are going to happen. Something will go wrong. The main character will have to step up his game in a training montage, and there will be an epic fight to round things off. Despite this, the movie doesn't fall down at any hurdle. It carefully squeezes the absolute best out of those cliches and decides to not put forward a story about boxing, but a tale of responsibility and an emotional bond between her father and his daughter. While Southpaw doesn't do much wrong, it doesn't overwhelm in any technical departments apart from acting. Gyllenhaal is at his very best yet again, disappearing into the character of Billy Hope with intelligent, or rather unintelligent delivery of dialogue, great physical movement, and extensive emotional depth. Whitaker also prevails with one of his best performances, as well as McAdams, Una Lawrence, Leela, Hope, and 50 Cent. Curtis Jackson also delivering solid performances in Tuan. Fuqua's direction is well realized. Certain moments are perfectly manifested to deliver uplifting drama and personal, gut-wrenching emotion. Each of these scenes boast incredible cinematography. A cinema is about what's in the frame and what's not in the frame. The cinematography at times truly promotes this ideology. Sons of Anarchy's Kurt Sider creates a meaningful script which is also on point. The score is mostly unnoticed in the film due to its constant battle with the brilliant soundtrack by Eminem. After the movie, I wondered why there was even a score at all, which was upsetting as I knew this was the last film James heard Titanic scored before his untimely death. Overall, Southpaw is definitely worth the watch in cinemas, especially if you're not really sold on any blockbuster movies like He, Mission Impossible, or the tragically criticized A Fantastic Horror reboot. It has a big heart and is brutally realistic with great performances and wonderfully dramatic father-daughter moments that will have you in tears multiple times throughout. Most boxing movies are rags to riches stories. Buddha Southpaw, starring a bulk-top Jake Gyllenhaal, is a riches drag story. This reversal of the traditional structure doesn't mean that the film isn't riddled with other cliches. However, write Kurt Satra, Sons of Anarchy, and director Antoine Fuqua, Training Day understands those cliches, and the film flaunts them like bling in a rap video. It's the deeply Uranest performances from Jill and Hala Forrest, Whitaker, a Une and a Rachel Madame, and a natural tendency to get behind the underdog. It keeps the Southpaw going even when a crushing inevitability hangs over the entire movie. It makes sense that a movie written and directed by the super macho pair of filmmakers would be gritty, which it is right from the first shot. With blood streaming down his face, longtime light heavyweight champ Billy Hope Gyllenhaal screams directly into the camera, taunting his opponent in the ring. It's okay that Billy's arms are down, leaving him unprotected. It turns out that's his thing. A Rocky Billy is used to taking lots of punishment. The intentional fast output, a title that pushes the underdog mentality even further and is loaded with all too obvious significance only, toward the end of the film, is to dole out that punishment to Billy outside of the ring and make sure the audience feels it as well. At first, Billy's life is perfect. He may have all of the tattoos and pent-up rage of a scary gangster culture sports professional, but he's really just a family man who dots on his daughter Layla Lawrence and is still madly in love with his former childhood sweetheart and wife Maureen. McAdams. The couple are both orphans, and their unlikely success story is the kind of thing that gives people, well, hope. The Great White Hope, technically, yes. He's white A, and the film was originally written for Minma, who was a producer A. Boa Southpaw strangely acknowledges that 1970 film by nicknaming Billy the hope but ignores its loaded racial connotations, striving instead for straightforward solemnity. If you've seen the trailer for a Southpaw and you've read my column before, you probably know I'm about to rant again. I stay away from trailers, so I didn't know this until after seeing the movie, but there is an enormous plot point given away in the trailer. I don't know why I even bother dancing around it, but let's just say that the perfect nouveau-riche lifestyle Billy and family is used to change his drastically and all at once. There are worse things in store for Billy than this, but his money mismanagement alone is of such an epic proportion that it's pretty tough to swallow. I take Curtis 50 Cent Jackson plays his money-hungry manager, and at first I thought he was too stiff and one-dimensional, as it was revealed how absolutely cold-hearted and devoid of human feeling the character is. However, I began to realize he might have just been perfectly cast. Hard to swallow. Plotting aside, Billy's tailspin is made more believable by Gyllenhaal's lived-in performance. And although the two actors don't have nearly enough scenes together, he and Lawrence managed to make the father-daughter relationship special. Even with the small amount of screen time together they actually have. By the time Billy's troubles lead him to the gym of Whitaker's wise, hard-luck boxing trainer, it is painfully clear where everything is headed. And the Southpaw relies on fuck with a string-together scene after montage of dark horse cliches. Don't call it a comeback. K-Hope is just a man humbled who must gather the courage to do the only thing he knows how to do, fight. Fukuin doesn't necessarily innovate in terms of film language when it comes to the boxing scenes. Where can anyone go after the impressionistic sound effects and camera work of a raging bull anyway? But they are paced with the requisite amount of ups and downs required for suspense. Like the rest of fast output, though, there's that inevitability factor, and it's tough to support a 20 film when its course seems predetermined and it hits every familiar beat along the way. He had to look good on a horse, so he could make westerns, be convincing in uniform for his combat films, be sexy in romances and romantic comedies, and look like he can take a punch for his boxing picture. Jake Gyllenhaal is ripped and ready for the body blows in Southpaw, a gritty but draggy ripoff of The Champ scripted by Sons of Anarchy, creator Kurt Sutter, and bathed in blood and sweat by unwant training Dave Fuqua. Gyllenhaal is Billy Hope, a mumbling, stammering Hell's Kitchen orphan who has fought his way to the top of his weight division. His fellow child of the streets, Rachel McAdams, has been there every step of the way. The wife always in his corner. Don't get hit too much. Billy's main weapons are his rage and his ability to take a punch. He trash-talks his foes even as his face is a wash in blood. But that temper is what sets off an out-of-ring melee with the challenger Miguel Gomez, and that leads to a shooting, and Mo is killed. It's a wrenching death scene that both Gyllenhaal and McAdams play the hell out. Enjoy it. The cops have so little interest in this very public murder that they basically drop the matter, as does the movie. Billy's life and career go into a death spiral despite the fact that he's rich and he has an adorable daughter, Una Lawrence, who needs him don't matter. His manager, Curtis 50 Cent Jackson, is no help. His boys are pushed aside. One disastrous fight later, and Billy loses the kid, the house, the Bentley, and Ferrari, everything he turns to blind in one night trainer Tick Forrest Whitaker to pull him out of it. The story arc is entirely too familiar to sustain the 2 hours plus length. The violence-gorn language are the only elements that lifted from the weepy melodrama that Southpaw wants to be into raging bull territory. Fuqua gives us a glove's-eye view of the fighting sequences, which are more believable than your standard-issue rocky but still strained creedle, since we are already straining to see Gyllenhaal as an inarticulate dead-ender in the dearly departed McAdams as anything but a prep school product. That's a distraction the film doesn't need, but Gyllenhaal covered in blood and tattoos. Fear no man on his back, his daughter's name and birthday in Roman numerals on his chest, puts the work in and makes us believe as he always does. Young miss, Lawrence tugs at the heartstrings. Whitaker gives fair gruff value, and Namie Harris makes the most of a thankless sod. Social worker role that's frankly beneath her. The dialogue of that which we can make out doesn't reinvent the movies. Gyllenhaal mumbles Whitaker slurs and 50 Cent doled up as a dapper fight. Promoter does the same, and some information about it. How do you like our today's video? Please let us know by commenting, and if you like this video, please like it, share it, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Thanks for watching.